So here's the thing, fellas. I wanted to make a build revolving around the exotic Karnstein armlets, which, by the way, are low-key meta on the Warlock class, and I wanted to combine it with a weapon that didn't get the insta-kill in close range, thus allowing me to follow up with a melee kill to proc Vampire's Caress. And I look no further than dear old Huckleberry. Now, Huckleberry, I would say, is probably in the best state amongst SMGs. Like, when we actually break down time to kill values amongst all of our SMGs, Huckleberry is at the top of the list. Like, the only other SMG that beats it out is actually Teraba with Ravenous Beast. But Huckleberry in its base form has a 0.67 time to kill value and ramps all the way down to 0.53. It's cooking, baby. Combining it with certain elements, Karnstein armlets with Vampire's Caress for that chunk of health bump on melee kills, as well as that continued health restoration for that small duration afterwards. In theory, this seems like a pretty good combo, especially considering that we even took Marty out of the bank. Yeah. So I'm combining all of these elements, man. I'm trying everything I can to essentially make an SMG work in this sandbox. And here's my results. SMGs, at least inside of PvP, is about as pointless as they get. Now, I'm not saying they're garbage. I'm not saying that SMGs can't serve you well. But base default time to kill values amongst all of our SMGs start off at 0.67 seconds and increases all the way to 0.8 seconds. It's body shot TTK values, which is substantially worse at 0.93 all the way up to 1.13. Now, granted, like I said before, certain exotics, of course, avoid this, Huckleberry being the perfect example. But for the most part, the time to kill value that I gave you there, outside of maybe Recluse with Master of Arms, every SMG in the game has an extended time to kill value with very limited range. Now, granted, I understand why we limit the range on our SMGs. If you gave them a hell of a lot of range, well, my God, you might as well just make them into an auto rifle. But considering the buffs that were handed out to auto rifles this past season, well, hell, fellas, you might as well have made every auto rifle a better SMG. Time to kill values for our auto rifles also range from 0.7 seconds to 0.93. Sound familiar? That's right, that's optimal. Now, body shot time to kill value weighs a little more there, starting on average around 1.17 seconds and amps all the way up to 1.47. Now, obviously, exotics completely avoid those super lengthy time to kill values. I mean, when we look at things like Tommy's Matchbook, Service Regime with spinning up, Hard Light with no damage fall off, you get the picture. The point I'm trying to make, guys, is that this is the first time in this sandbox that I picked up an SMG inside of PvP, and I just wanted to see if it would work. Huckleberry, I named it the best SMG in the game back in Shadowkeep. Even as good as Huckleberry is, with the exotic catalyst, the right exotics to pair with it, Marty, quick access sling on Marty, all kinds of crazy shenanigans here to make Huckleberry shine, it still came up short, at least in comparison to the power of auto rifles. So what do? Do we just say, hey, that's just what happens, man? It's Sandbox, boys. What's good one season is trash the next. That's really not what bothers me. What bothers me is when the identity of any weapon archetype is undermined. So much so that you can go an entire season without even thinking about it. With the most recent buffs there to auto rifles, there is no reason, none whatsoever, to use an SMG over an auto rifle. You're limiting your range, substantially so at that, and even though the time to kill values might be slightly better with some of our other SMGs, they are much harder to be consistent with. You gotta get pretty much a god roll on any SMG to make that weapon work for you. And by the way, I know I'm showing a lot of gameplay here of Huckleberry popping off pretty well. This is Huckleberry. Huckleberry is a fantastic SMG, but just go take any other mediocre role SMG and try giving it a spin in Crucible. And if you happen to be a controller user or on console, amplify that inconsistency times 10. That's right, as bad as SMGs may be here on PC, it's 10 times worse for a controller user, which is why you probably never see anyone on console actively using SMGs, especially in this sandbox. So what is the point of this discussion? What the hell are we even trying to get to here, man? Because Cross, you just rambling, bro. You're right. But the point I'm trying to get to is that this is the perfect example of power creep, but in PvP. You hear about power creep being talked about a bunch in PvE. But right now, we're looking at time to kill values of 0.7 seconds, which is faster than even some of our best time to kill values back in D1. When you start reaching 0.7 seconds on an auto rifle that can map you from 30, 34 meters consistently, you don't just undermine submachine guns, but you really start to undermine pretty much every other weapon type in the game. Scout rifles, pulse rifles. And as bad as Recluse was back in its heyday, before it got nerfed, it blows my mind that just a season ago, Recluse was finally dealt with and nerfed, and then we turned around and had a sandbox shift in auto rifles and gave 600 round per minute auto rifles a base time to kill of 0.7 seconds. Honestly, pre-nerf Recluse would actually be just fine in this sandbox. As crazy as that sounds, it would actually be okay, because compared to other auto weapons, such as our auto rifles and their base time to kill values, Recluse is no longer an outlier. And I'm not talking about current Recluse, I'm talking about pre-nerf Recluse. So am I trying to say that auto rifles need to be nerfed? Well, now, we're what? 4 or 5 weeks into the new season? I'm not jumping to that level yet. Auto rifles really don't even tick me off. There's a lot of weapons in the game that annoy me outside of auto rifles. I will say hard light's getting a bit annoying with the ricochet damage, and that's only because I get killed inside of cover. No, I'm not saying though that auto rifles should be brought to what they were pre-season of Worthy. I just simply want to point out today that whoever it is that's in charge of Sandbox at Bungie, we're starting to play a very dangerous game here. These consecutive drops here in time to kill value that are speeding up the game. The go fast updates, the buffs to things like Dune Marchers, which already buff movement speed. Everything inside of Destiny 2 Crucible is getting faster. The result? Well, the result is just some weapons will never be looked at ever, at least not seriously. This is your meta, and this is what your meta has been pretty much every single weekend. Hard Light has been somewhere at the top of the list. A Mindbender, a Revoker, a Suros, Astro, Beloved, Summoner, Spare, Dust Rock, and Bastion. And I would say Bastion is probably the only creative weapon thrown on that list. But I don't necessarily want to just look at each one of these weapons. I just want to outline how much Hard Light, Mindbender, and Revoker completely outweigh all the other options. I can tell you right now, there'll never be an SMG on this list. Never. The only SMG that had a chance was pre-nerf Recluse. I can't believe I'm actually saying that I wish we would have left Recluse alone. But on some levels, had I had known that the time to kill value for auto rifles would have been brought down so, yeah, I would have looked the Sandbox team straight in the face and told them, hey, if you guys are planning on actually dropping time to kill values to 0.7 seconds on an auto rifle, then either adjust every other SMG or leave Recluse alone. Now, I'm not going to sit here and try to pretend to be the champion of SMGs, okay? Yes, I like Huckleberry, and that's the only SMG I'm in love with. I like Wrist Runner too. I'm a big fan of the exotics, and I know we got some new SMGs this season, the Seraph SMG, as well as the new Global Drop SMG that we're going to be reviewing this week. Good weapons, but not a weapon you're going to ever see on that Trials list. Matter of fact, there's a lot of weapons that you will never see on that Trials list. And I said a few weeks ago when we actually made our Trials video that actually the Sandbox itself was the one thing that I wasn't really that upset with. But that was actually from the point of view of a mouse and keyboard user from PC. I would say on console, as bad as auto rifles may be here for us here on PC, it is 10 times worse on console. I can imagine most console users can't use anything but an auto rifle inside of Trials. At least whenever we play Trials on the weekends here on PC, despite the cheaters we may run up against, despite whatever other crap we may go up against, at least I can still use a hand cannon somewhat effectively to get through my Trials run. As for where auto rifles are, this is going to be the new bar, the new standard for time to kill value, which is effectively a 10th less than what it was back inside of D1 and what I thought Bungie was trying to achieve in D2. Again, when D2 launched, effectively 1.1 second was the time to kill value. And understand, many maps, original maps that launched with D2 were designed for both not just that 1.1 time to kill value, base time to kill value at that, but also 4v4 and slower movement speed. Everything has ramped up significantly since. And with Bungie's big change here to auto rifles, this is going to require one of two things. Either these weapons are going to have to be swung back the other way, thus a nerf, or everything else is going to have to be pushed forward into this new standard. I would actually go for the latter. I mean, who knows? 0.7 might be what everyone wants. The main goal of today's video, though, is just to point out that many weapons in our game, entire archetypes, not sub-archetypes, but entire archetypes of weapons have been left behind due to this new standard. So guys, that is my video on this. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Would you just like to see our other primary weapons brought up to snuff, or auto rifles rifles toned down. I will say, even if you do tone down auto rifles, say not completely, but just slightly, you still have to recognize the fact that on that trials list, special weapon kills still outweigh primary kills. I know it's elimination, but just think about that for a second. Making primaries weaker doesn't make people use other primaries. In fact, it just makes them use specials. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
Slap that like button like your mama told you right.